Hi everyone. We're gonna get started now. Hopefully, we have most of the people are gonna show up. Welcome to the first Presto community meeting, and thanks for making the time. We know it's not a time that works for everyone. So people had to wake up early. Some people had to stay up late. So thanks. We're gonna start with some logistics. Well, before we do that, I'm Martin. This is Dane. This is David. We're the original creators of Presto and founders of the Presto Software Foundation. Let's talk about some of the logistics for the meeting before we get going. So this is a 1-hour meeting. It's been recorded, so if people can attend, we'll be able to see it later. We posted the agenda online. To recap quickly, we're going to talk about the foundation. We're going to spend a few minutes on that and then how to get involved. We're going to cover the recent features added in the last couple of releases and talk about some of the most important features that people have asked and expressed interest in having. And then we expect to spend most of the time talking about release verification and testing. We want this to be a discussion, so we want people to participate there. It's a bit of an experiment. We have right now 30 people in the meeting, more than 50 people registered. So bear with us. We're going to try to figure out how to make it orderly as people participate. So right now people should be muted. We're gonna open up for questions after we talk about some of the topics. I want to ask that if you have a question, please comment on the chat, and I'll unmute you so you can speak up. Otherwise, it's gonna be a big mess if everyone talks at the same time. All right. So, and then if you have feedback on whether this works or doesn't work, or suggestions, of course, we're open to that. All right.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you mentioned it, but so after this, we'll be on Slack for anything else like that, you didn't get to ask.
Yeah, this is only the first of the first meeting. It's not the only one. So we hope to have these kinds of meetings every week or every couple of weeks to start with. So don't feel like everything needs to be covered here. We can always talk more in future meetings or even on Slack.
Okay. All right. I'm Dane. I'm going to talk about the foundation, give a bit of a recap of what's going on, some of the details, contributing guidelines and stuff like that, and then open this section up for questions. So we started talking about the foundation. We went around and talked to a lot of the significant contributors to Presto over the years. We started this back in December, and everyone we talked to was really excited about it. And so we, of course, continue to move forward. And then this year, we started setting up the legal entity, et cetera. We finished the incorporation on January 16th. And you should have seen some of the talk about that on the dev Slack. And then on the 31st, last week, we did a press release, and that was picked up by a bunch of news articles, and hopefully that's spread to everyone, well, at least everyone on this call. As part of this process, we set up a new GitHub org, a new Slack, a new website. There's a new Twitter account. Everything's named Presto SQL. Please actually follow our Twitter account. We'll continue to post information as more stuff comes out. We'll also be posting release information as we do releases to Twitter moving forward. One of the big changes that happened was all the code moved from the old package, com Facebook Presto, to IO Presto SQL. And there are new Maven group IDs for this. So if you have existing extensions, or existing connector extensions, or you've extended the code base, et cetera, you're going to have to update the packages and the group IDs. It's normally a fairly straightforward process. We have directions on the website. There's a wiki on how to migrate. There's a channel in Slack dedicated to help people out with that process. So if you run into any issues, just ask us. Even if you have like private extensions, like we'll try and help you out the best you can. More on the foundation. All right, so what we set up for the foundation is we set up a really lean nonprofit. There are no employees. We don't have any intent to have employees moving forward. Really, we see the foundation as being there to support this open source community. So helping out with infrastructure needs. So making sure we have Travis and Slack and the website, the bigger testing environment, these infrastructure for these meetings that we're having right now, and to, you know, be a place where, you know, we can have someone come and say, hey, we should all go talk about this stuff, or a place where people can come and ask, like the larger community. Sorry. So this is where we're starting. So one of the things we're trying to do in the beginning is like there's only a few people like involved in working on this stuff. We want to start really simple, and then not overcommit the foundation to too much stuff. And so in the future, like I think we might want to expand what the foundation is doing into things like maybe community meetups or conferences. If that's something that you, the overall community, want to see the foundation doing, like start talking to us, and we'll see where we want to grow. If there's other things we're not thinking about, please come talk to us. But to start with, we're going to start really simple and focus on infrastructure, just community communication channels. So when we started talking to everyone back in November. One of the big things was like, one of the big questions, actually, we still see this on the mailing list, is that there's this big question is like, what's the purpose of this? All right. So our vision is that we want the project, actually, since the day we founded this project, we really wanted the project to be an open, collaborative, independent project. A lot of us, the original founders, have experience in open source, and like, you know, a project of this scale just really isn't possible with a lot of people being involved and, you know, having a lot of use cases. So from the beginning, we're like, we really want to bring in as much people as possible, bring in what everyone else is interested in, and make sure the project can support a much bigger community. That way it can last for a really long time. And so the foundation is really set up to make sure that we're maintaining this openness and this collaboration and this independence. The foundation is starting with the same procedures and policies that we had in place for the past 6 years that really made this project successful. So it's the same path to committership. We process, you know, PRs going through the same process. The way we come up with like what we're going to work on, like, you know, we all get together and we talk about it. The vision of the project, the development philosophy, all that sort of stuff is the same. One really big change, though, is we went and wrote it down. So if you go to the website, there's a section where we talk about the vision of the project and the developer process and stuff like this. This is something that we should have done a long time ago. The project originally started out with, you know, less than like 4 people that worked on it for a couple of years, and then that slowly grew. And so, and the community, as the community grew, like we knew everyone, so we would just talk to people one-on-one and share the vision and the processes like in a one-on-one basis. But there was a time where like the project just started accelerating and we never actually wrote down what was going on. So that's all written down now, and you can see it on the website. And if you have any questions, like just ask us about that on Slack or whatever. Or if it's not clear, because this is the first pass of it. It's you know, it's an evolving document. So one of the common questions is, how do we get involved? Right now, the foundation is not taking financial contributions, but what we're really looking for people is to contribute code. If you find bugs, report them, get involved in discussions on Slack. Tell us about what is missing that you guys need to make your, you know, well, don't tell us, tell the whole community, like, hey, it would be great if we could do X. That would allow us to do, you know, a lot more stuff with Presto. Get involved in code reviews. If you were, it would be great if we can get more people blogging about Presto and advocating for the project. If you do make a blog or advocate or do a presentation, let us know and we'll retweet it or help promote your events through the Twitter account. Oh, yes, and please fill out your CLAs and send those in. It's kind of sad when we get a good contribution, it takes a while for the CLAs to process. So if you're thinking about contributing, just send a CLA in early so we can, you know, get that processed for you. And I think that's everything I have in the notes. So at this point, we're gonna open this up to questions about sorry, what?
Yeah, about what we talked about.
Yeah, about the foundation, the purpose, getting involved. Again, there's like 50 people involved. So if you want, if you have a question, like ask on the chat or, you know, say, hey, I want to talk and we'll unmute you just because there are a lot of people here. So I'm going to start by answering the most common question we get every time we go out and talk about this, which is, why did you do a separate foundation instead of joining Apache, Cloud Native Foundation, Linux Foundation? There's like a half a dozen of these. So we actually spent a long time looking at virtually every foundation out there, how they work, what's positive and negative about the different ones. And none of them were like a really good fit for what we do in the Presto Foundation. So like, I'll speak of Apache. Like, I'm an Apache member. Like, I love Apache. Apache's like really excellent. Apache has exactly one way of running an open source project. They call it the Apache way, and it's not exactly what we do in this project. And so what we wanted to do was to come up with a foundation that was very much tuned to the way Presto works and the Presto process, and
have the flexibility to evolve it in the future if we need to.
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest things, is like when things aren't working, we want the ability to be able to change. And a lot of foundations, like you do it their one way, and if it doesn't work for you, you're kind of stuck. So we wanted the ability to like, hey, things aren't working, let's change the process, let's do whatever to focus on it. All right. I don't see any more questions. Is there any other very common questions, or do we want to move on?
Well, let's wait. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Right. Please type in the chat, and we'll.
Yeah, there is a chat window. You got to click a button at the bottom if you don't see it.
Or if no one's talking, just unmute yourself and ask a question.
This is the first time we've ever used this software, so it's working, we think, pretty well so far. You already know if AWS releases Presto. Do you want to handle that one, Martin?
So about the first question of whether we know if AWS Presto releases will follow Presto SQL. We've been talking to the people at AWS, and they seem interested in supporting the effort and participating. So we hope so. Like, we haven't heard anything publicly from them yet, though. The second one, in the past, contributing to the Presto project was not easy due to less or no visibility of roadmaps. That's exactly one of the things we're trying to address with the foundation. It's like, and part of the purpose of this meeting is to start creating more transparency, be more explicit about things. Hopefully, like, we're going to do these meetings more regularly, so people will be able to see what's happening, what's coming up. People will be able to exchange or discuss and exchange ideas about what they need and what they want to work on. So hopefully this is something that the whole community can put together in terms of having more clarity on roadmap.
I was going to say that the next section of this, we are going to talk a bit about what people wanted the most, which I think is where we start with the roadmap. But actually building a solid roadmap requires the cooperation of everyone who's contributing, because we don't, it's open source volunteers. So we need to understand what other people are committed to delivering, so you can understand what other people are committing to delivering. I think that's the same question.
So third question is, it was mentioned you guys will share roadmap or more requested features. Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the features that we heard people asking for the past few months. Actually, that's coming up next. And if you have, when we get to that, if there are things that we haven't talked about that, or we didn't mention that are interesting or useful to people, like, feel free to comment here, or we can talk later on Slack. We haven't talked to everyone, so yeah. Obviously we haven't covered everything we haven't heard everything that people might want. Okay, so
I'll move over so David can talk about this next section.
Okay.
Hi, I'm David. So we're going to talk about what features we've added in the past release or two. A huge one that just landed is role support. This is standard SQL roles. So anyone familiar with standard SQL model will be happy about that. It provides a lot more flexibility than just single users, because now you can group things together. We added a new invoker security for views. So the standard SQL security model is that views always run as the owner, which is nice because like an administrator can create a restricted view of a table where the end user doesn't have access to inline tables, but they have access to the view that, like, restricts the rows or the columns available. But this didn't work for some security models where people just want to use views as a stored query. So now you can define a view where there's no special security changes to the view. The view is simply a stored query, just as if you pasted in the SQL query into the query that's using the view. We added an analyze statement that allows you to collect statistics for tables. So in recent versions, when Presto writes data in the Hive connector, it can store statistics back out, and the analyze command extends that. So if you already have existing data but there aren't stats, you can run analyze to collect the statistics for that, and that feeds back into the cost-based optimizer that can do join reordering and other things for you. We also added S3 select pushdown support, was contributed by Amazon, and this allows you to run queries over data in S3 like CSV files and have basic filters and column projections pushed all the way down into S3. So instead of pulling all the data back in Presto, it can greatly reduce the network transfer and the CPU usage on Presto. And we'll have more features coming up in the next releases.
Which is coming today.
Yeah, hopefully today. So we'll be able to we'll post those on Twitter and talk about those in the next meeting. So in all these meetings we've had with different big users and developers of Presto, we've heard about what things people really want. So this is the summary. A big one is pass-through security, where if you're an end user and like say you have a credential for like S3 or Google Cloud Storage or one of those, rather than having to have Presto be a super user and have access to all that data, the end user can actually send the credential into Presto and have Presto use that credential to fetch the data. This is pretty different than like the standard SQL security model, but it was important for a lot of environments where they can't have Presto be trusted to do that. And that'll hopefully land in the next release or the release after that. And this both provides, the initial support will be for Google Cloud tokens, and it'll provide the infrastructure so that we can add this for S3 or Azure, or you can add it to your own connectors or plugins. Another one is coordinator high availability. So this can actually mean a lot of different things, but the first thing that we're working on is you can have multiple clusters with each with their own coordinator, and the queues is pulled out into a separate service. So you have a single queue for multiple clusters, and that'll let you do things like even restart a cluster without losing all the queued queries. And then in the future, the next step will be to make the queue persistent. So like maybe it'll get stored into MySQL or something so that you can do like a full restart without, or lose a machine without like losing all of your queued queries. As people use Presto for like large batch jobs in addition to quick interactive workloads, they often run queries that run for multiple hours. So losing a node can be a lot more painful when you spent several hours across hundreds of machines doing work. So people want partial failure recovery for that. And there's a lot of different things that can be done there, but like we have some ideas on like where we can get the most bang for the buck. Another very common thing that we've heard that people have actually been asking for years is much better pushdown support, or more generally, people want connectors to be able to participate in planning. But the common use case for that is they want to be able to push down aggregations or push down more complex projections like function calls, or they want to push down filters like regular expressions into connectors. And so long term, we'd like to have a fully general framework so that connectors can have full participation in planning, and like they can provide their own optimizers and whatnot. But in the near term, we're planning to add more advanced pushdown support so that people can start using it right away. This is going to be evolving. So if you're an early adopter of this, expect that the APIs are probably not going to be stable and going to be evolving as we add more support and figure out like what the APIs and whatnot should actually look like. Part of this is, or a related feature is row level security. And this plays down into like row level security means a security manager like Ranger can push a row level filter into your query. So that's actually a connector like pushing filters back into the engine. So that goes together with like more advanced pushdowns. One thing that we're really excited about is Netflix's Iceberg, which is a new metadata format for Hive data, or like more general, or like data stored in cloud storage systems like S3. It solves a huge number of problems that exist with like the current Hive model that anyone who's tried to use like Hive or Presto on S3 has to deal with. So we're really excited about like getting that in, and like it'll make it a lot easier to like run your big warehouses on object stores like S3. So another big thing that people ask about is more flexibility for functions. There's a lot of different areas in this. One is that they want connectors to be able to dynamically provide functions, like say they want to like be able to add a jar file and then have a connector or a plugin automatically pick it up and expose it to the user. Another thing is be able to run functions remotely or like on a different server. So anyone who's like had to run like a big Hive deployment knows the problem of running arbitrary user code in your cluster and then having like random functions that people write like mess up the whole cluster for everybody. So one way to solve that is you put the function behind an API, and then Presto can just talk to it remotely. We want to support more advanced functions that can do things like return tables or implement the polymorphic table functions from the SQL standard, which can do things like basically take a table as input and then completely transform the table and return a new table as output. There's a whole lot of really cool things you can do with that, which we're excited about. And then the last thing that people want is to be able to create functions in SQL. So they can say, create function and then provide a function body in different languages. For example, the SQL standard has a language that you can define functions in. It's actually the same one. MySQL implements that standard. And so we're going to provide support for that. We also want to make it more generic so that plugins can provide like language support. So say a plugin can provide a JavaScript function language for SQL, similar to Postgres, where Postgres, you can have plugins that provide their own languages for functions. Of course, you're going to have to be careful if you're providing a language, because if you let users write in arbitrary languages, like a lot of things can go wrong. So we're going to do the SQL standard one will be like fully sandboxed and should be like safe for people to use. Other ones you have to be more careful about. And the last one that we've heard about is support for case-sensitive identifiers. So from day one in Presto, we've always had case-insensitive identifiers where basically everything is lowercase. We did this because Hive didn't need case-sensitive identifiers, and we figured this would be easy to just go and fix later. Like a lot of things, like when you're starting a project, you think, well, we'll do the easy thing, and then think like we can fix stuff later instead of like spending a bunch of time to implement things you don't need. And it turned out that this was one of the things that was really hard to fix later. That's why we haven't fixed it. So we made a mistake on that one, but we're going to hopefully, basically it touches everything from like all the way from like the SQL language all the way through the engine, through all the connectors, through like all the APIs back and forth. It's a huge mess, but like we've got a plan to fix that. So hopefully that'll happen sometime.
Do we have questions here?
Yeah, we have some questions and suggestions. So someone's asking where can they report issues? So if you find a bug or have a suggestion, either you can ping someone on Slack and on the Slack channel and ask, or file an issue on the GitHub repository, GitHub/PrestoSQL. There's a link on the website too if you haven't seen it. Other feature suggestions: Kubernetes operator.
That one's in progress. There's a whole discussion on that, and I think there's a Kubernetes channel on Slack, maybe. Yeah. Join it if you want to know more.
I'll follow up on that one.
Presto router gateway for multiple clusters.
Follow up on Slack on that. There's like 3 or 4 different ways to do that, and it depends on exactly what you want.
Partition discovery for partition tables.
Oh, I believe that's the Amazon thing where you're like, hey, reload my partitions. Yeah, these are great ideas. Like, yeah, we should add.
Yeah, we'll add into the list. So fault tolerance for subtask failures and task retries, that's related to partial failure recovery we mentioned. Worker auto scaling. I believe some like QL and Starburst have been working on some aspects related to this.
And that's part of the Kubernetes thing also.
Right. Batch ETL, that's actually one of the biggest use case for Presto lately. It's what we have been doing at Facebook over the past couple of years, what people have been asking for, and with fault tolerance and high availability, we'll be able to support that even better.
I was going to say, to be clear, Presto is used for batch ETL in several environments, but it could. There's a list of things to make it even better, but it actually works really well for batch ETL today.
Right. So next question: is there a guide to how to use Presto for batch ETL? I don't think there's a guide. If you have specific questions, I think Slack will be the best place to ask and get the collective help from everyone.
And if you want to write one, that would be awesome too.
Yeah. And we can share some like configuration things that we did at Facebook to make it run well, especially like the differences between our batch and ETL clusters.
All right. Will you have regular release cadence? How about LTS versions? The current plan, and this is what we have been trying to do since we created the project, is to have releases every week, and we're trying to maintain that. And maybe even in the future be able to release more frequently, and have more confidence on releases being correct and have no regressions and so on. We haven't talked about LTS versions. That's something that's an interesting point, and we should probably discuss it further later. I mean, I know Starburst supports a form of an LTS version, so maybe we can.
I mean, doing long-term support requires a really big buy-in from the community. It's not a small undertaking.
Right, some thumbs up for Iceberg.
Absolutely.
Yeah, some people also supporting batch ETL. So in terms of push down support, yes, that's specifically about being able to push down partial aggregations, full aggregations, more complex filters, projections, even joins, or in the future, like in the long term, the idea is to be able to push down entire subqueries into connectors.
I was gonna say that the aggregation thing is like definitely the use cases you're thinking of, like how do I execute a query and take advantage of partial aggregations in Druid or Elasticsearch, possibly Mice, like places that already either have them rolled up or can roll them up natively. Yeah.
Right. How will the collaboration with Facebook be going forward? Will Presto SQL be open to porting work from PrestoDB GitHub? We don't know what Facebook's plans are, but like we're going to be watching for improvements in the old repo, and we're going to be porting them as necessary. So, and also if you have contributed work to the old repo, we encourage you to also submit it to the to the Presto SQL repo.
Yeah. So we've already picked across some of the bigger changes, but we would encourage people to donate, if they're donating to the Presto DB, to also donate to the Presto SQL, because it's a bit of work to pick stuff across. So please help out.
Yeah, but if you need help, like rebasing your pull request into our repository, we're happy to help.
Oh yeah, and if there's something there that you need, come talk to us, and we'll try and get that pulled across.
Right, more thumbs up for dynamics, dynamic functions and cases to identifiers. We have some pain points with SQL syntax or +1 for compatibility with Spark. Better documentation, yes. For logging support, yes. Like that would be a good area for people to contribute if anyone's interested.
I'm going to talk about the Spark one. So for SQL syntax, we support the anti-SQL standard, and I believe Spark does as well. Of course, that doesn't mean there's not there's lots of stuff that's not in the standard that any database has to have to be useful.
Like all the functions.
Yeah. So if there's specific things like that you use in Spark that aren't in Presto, let us know and we'll see what we can do there.
Yeah. So one of the things we didn't mention about the work we're doing on flexible functions is we're implementing the SQL standard path, which you can think of as like your Unix command path, which will allow us to have functions that have the same name that are in different namespaces, so that if Spark or MySQL has a different implementation of some function with a common name, you'll be able to implement that and then reorder your path so you get their version versus our version, which should make stuff easier depending on what environment you want to set up for your users.
All right. Any plans for supporting ACID?
Hive ACID.
Yeah, Hive ACID.
So about once a year, about once a year and a half, someone asked if we're going to support Hive ACID, and our response is, if Hive ACID catches on, we will absolutely implement it. We haven't seen really any demand for it. Almost always when people are asking, they're saying, I'm thinking about using Hive ACID. Do you guys support it? And we're like, no one else is using it to the best of our knowledge. I'm actually like, the iceberg stuff really, I think, removes the need for Hive ACID, and I'm hoping it catches on because it's a much simpler model and easier to reason about. But if there is a demand for Hive ACID, we'll absolutely implement it. Like, just come and talk.
Okay, any chance of implementing an authentication model with user password without LDAP or HTTPS?
Oh.
Yeah, so actually you can write, if you go to the plugin section of the developer section of the documentation, you can write a password authenticator plugin. It tells you how to do that. And so LDAP is actually just a plugin for passwords. So you can implement your own, like if you wanted to read passwords from a file or talk to any other system, it's easy.
Yeah. We have no plans to support username and password over HTTP. It's just not secure.
Yeah. Actually, all of our security, all of the authentication methods require HTTPS because basically none of them are secure if the credentials are sent plain text over the wire. So we just absolutely like refuse to, like clients will refuse to send a password over HTTP. Like they'll just fail because they don't want you to accidentally leak your password.
All right, Apache Arrow and Flight RPC framework.
I don't. So we've talked about using Arrow as a high performance way of transmitting data to clients as opposed to the JSON we're using today.
Which is the next question here. But,
yeah. But I've never heard of Flight RPC, so we'll look that up.
We should follow up.
Yeah. Okay, and then using Apache Calcite. This is a question that comes up every now and then. Like Apache Calcite has it's a completely different implementation of the Presto, of the optimizer framework. So I think that would be a big undertaking to use that. One of the things about Presto is we want the flexibility to be able to evolve the optimizer. So there are some challenges in depending on a third-party library that has its own release cadence and so on. So
yeah, I also, like, from what I remember, there was a team at Facebook that attempted to re-implement parts of the Presto language in Calcite and found that there's a whole bunch of features missing, like, which is expected. Like there's some overlap. There's some things they have that we don't, and there's some things we have that they don't. So it's not a definite win.
Right. Any plan to support a JDC connector parallelism for better federated query performance?
Yeah, that's another top requested feature, and we have some ideas on how to do that. Like in theory, it's easy. The hard part is like, how do you configure it? How do you tell like Presto how to parallelize it correctly? And we've got some ideas on how other projects do that.
Yeah, there was a discussion last year sometime, if I remember.
Right. Any plan to improve memory connector mechanism to auto cache common access tables partitions? I don't think there are any concrete plans, but this is something we've been talking about like for the past 4 years in terms of how to cache data, how to cache query results or partial query results. And I think there's a lot of potential there. It's one of those areas that would be worth exploring.
So that's Martine's way of saying, like, if you want something specific, please ask on the Slack channel. Come talk to us.
Or if you want to get involved,
Yeah.
like,
yes, please.
Yeah. All right, HTTP2 support. So Presto supports HTTP2 already. We had been testing it at Facebook for quite a while, for about a year or so, and we've been finding issues in the implementation, in the underlying HTTP2 implementation. I think as of this point, it works for pretty much everything we tried. So, but we don't have any exposure to other people having tried it. So if you want to give it a try and see if you have find any problems, please do so and report the issues.
We probably need to move on at this point.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna stop with the questions now, so we have some time to talk about the last topic. Like, if you have more questions, like, please, we're gonna be on Slack. Everyone should be on Slack, so we can keep discussing there.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about release verification, what we do, just a quick intro so we can hopefully get some more discussion. So right now, okay, so what we need to be able to do with this project is we have this pretty aggressive release cadence where we're trying to release every week. And the way for us to be able to do that, we need to be confident in that the releases are correct and the performance is good and it's going to run well. The way we, these sorts of verifications, they're super important to be able to have all of us developers be confident that, you know, when we're making a change, that we're not going to like break the system for everyone. So we really want to increase confidence. So right now, I'll talk about this. Right now, we have pretty good coverage on correctness, but we've always had like just okay coverage for performance. So when I go and work on something that I know is performance sensitive, I have to spend a lot more time because I'm not personally super confident that I'm not going to break something. So we want to increase the confidence of all of our developers so we can move faster. We want to increase the coverage of a variety of workloads. So historically, we did most of our testing at Facebook, but Facebook's environment is not super representative of everyone else's. Like, Facebook runs in a data center, not on a cloud provider. You know, Facebook used a custom file system implementation instead of S3 or HDFS and so on. What we want to do is we want to make sure we have good coverage of like cloud environments, of in data center environments, not just Hive environments, people using the JDBC connector or the memory connector, and kind of increase this for everyone. So as we kind of look into what we're doing with testing and verification, it breaks down into three major areas. So we have correctness testing. So this is largely represented today by the extensive unit tests and product tests. So when you submit a PR to Presto, you'll notice that a huge Travis job kicks off where it runs like 16 builds in parallel and takes like, you know, an hour. And that's running all these unit tests across like every connector. So that's what we have today. And what we're looking forward, moving forward, is to really expand that some more by pulling in some test suites from some related database tools. So there's database tools that other databases that have some pretty large test suites that we'd like to pull in to increase more of our correctness testing. For performance, we have the Benchtoe system, which was contributed by Starburst. And they use that to run TCP/DS. They're doing that on a manual basis for us. And so you'll see in the releases channel, like every once in a while they'll post and say, hey, like we haven't we haven't seen a regression or we're seeing a slight regression. We'd like to expand this and have it be automated, have it run in, for example, a cloud environment. I think they run on private hardware for that. So we would really like to see some community effort around like automating the performance. So hopefully every day we can have a much better idea of whether or not we made the system better or worse yesterday. So then the third area is stress testing. There really isn't a stress testing system that has happened before releases go out. Typically, like a release goes out, it would be deployed, and then like within a day or two, if there was a problem, we'd hear about it, we'd quick fix it, and do another release. What we'd like to do is to move the stress testing up so it's pre-release. So this is just an idea of what we can do. Like, we're definitely looking for more from anyone in the community, is to set up a cluster on like AWS or GCP and run like, I don't know, 20 parallel streams of TCP/DS and run it for a couple hours, see if anything falls over or backs up, just to make sure that like the system isn't going to die under load. Again, needs automation, just like the performance testing suite. So those are like the main areas of how we can take a release and figure out whether or not it's going to work well for us. The other idea that came up as we talked to a lot of the people contributing was everyone has environment specific stuff. And so if you notice, like releases, when we did them before with Facebook, we would run a simulated environment at Facebook and say that, and then when the releases go out, they would be, the releases we had a fairly good idea at Facebook would run okay in the Facebook environment. What we want to do is we want to create that same sort of experience for your environment. So if you have a big environment and you might have your own custom extensions, etc., the idea is that you commit to working with the community on every night running either a simulated or a mirrored run of your production, and then by the next morning you tell the community, hey, this worked, it did not work. Now we understand that no one can share their data, their queries, their configuration, their security rules, any of that thing with anyone else. So this is kind of an over-the-wall model where you would just say, hey, it worked, it didn't work, okay? And then your commitment to the community is that within a few hours, you're gonna dig into it and tell the community like, hey, it looks like someone broke something in partial aggregations. We think it has queries that look like this or something like that, and then work with the community to work through those bugs. So the basic idea is that with that process, when any release comes out, you would be confident, have a good confidence that it's going to work well in your environment, which means you're going to be able to follow the releases at a faster pace. Or more importantly, if there's something you want to upgrade to, like you can pick really any release and be fairly confident that it's going to work for you. So this is something we've talked about. There's a couple of, we've heard some feedback from people who want to be involved. If you want to be involved in a program like that, please reach out on Slack and talk to us. And those are the big areas. So anyone who has any, so we're going to open this up to discussion. We're looking for some suggestions around if you want to have ideas for correctness testing, better performance testing, better stress testing, or environment specific testing, or maybe a completely another idea that we're not thinking of at all. And if you have any questions, ask, or if you just want to talk, just, unmute if no one's there, or ask. everyone is clearly super jazzed about testing.
Hey, I have a word. Sorry, I'm just going to unmute myself rather than trying to type this out. This is Mark. I think a lot of people have, we take the sort of core releases and then most people end up doing minor alterations on top of them. I know we have things related to like certain file formats or security or just usability fixes or that kind of thing. And I like the idea of having sort of like a community release process where everyone is sort of doing these nightly test runs, and if we can provide some tools so that not everyone has to rebuild that infrastructure for themselves, that'd be great. But one thing I think that requires is that we have to sort of make more trade-offs when like accepting contributions about like maybe this isn't perfect, but it unblocks someone, because we can't do that like manual rebase step on every release, right? So for example, like the Netflix connector, or Netflix has been developing the Iceberg connector. They have that internal, but if we want them to run like a nightly build, we have to get that in earlier, right? So I wonder, like, there's also, of course, we don't want to like accept things and merge things before they're ready, but I think that sort of it requires some thought.
Yeah, on connectors, so historically, and I haven't been involved in the last few connectors that went in, but like our policy has been like, as long as the thing is at a basic level of quality and sort of works, sometimes we merge them in and we just don't document them, or we mark this as like, hey, this is a work in progress. And because it's new and it's something that like literally you have to opt into the connector. So the risk is not huge to the overall community. Whereas like if this is a change in the core optimizer, like it has to be pretty well thought out. And even then we typically gate all those sorts of things in case there's a problem, so we can turn them off and not have to do another release. So this has developed over the last like couple years. So it's like, we recently have done a lot more like config gating for new features. So yeah, I totally agree. Like, and we need to, sorry, go ahead.
No, one thing I was going to say, it's, I think we need to get better at having the hooks that are necessary for like people like Netflix or LinkedIn or whoever to be able to have these extensions without having to patch the code base. Ideally, it should be as easy as dropping in your extension into the standard Presto release off of trunk and just have it work. So like we need to identify those places, and as they come up, like please let's talk and let's figure out how to deal with those. And
I think to your point, like we could have been a lot better about working with people to get things integrated. Like we didn't always have as much time as we should have had at Facebook to work on that. And that's one of the big things we're trying to improve with the foundation, is working with everybody so that it's a better experience and that we can make it work better for you.
Okay, we have some comments on the chat. Well, Piotr is noting that, yeah, it takes hours to run stress and performance tests. So for release verification, we need to code freeze. Yeah, that's what we do today for releases. Like hopefully, like we should be able to, or ideally, we will be able to improve the speed of tests and stress tests and performance tests, like by having more infrastructure to run them on or something.
I so totally agree. Like there's a point at which we're like, we want to, when we figure out, because of the release process we're doing right now is very much we're going to pick a version and then commit, and then we're going to verify that and then release that. So we have to have a freeze window. But we can keep those windows short by making sure that we're actually doing this release verification like once a day, so that, when we go from, whatever ran and was verified and looks pretty good. There's a very small number of commits, so that we're not, you know, going into this iterative cycle of like, oh, that didn't work, and oh, there's more commits coming in. So the more often we do it, the easier it should be.
And we can tweak that process a bit where like we land any major changes at the beginning of a release cycle. And like at the end, sure, you can merge like a new function, but don't merge like changing how the execution engine works.
Yeah, that's what I do, because I don't want to be the guy holding up the release.
So we have a few comments about having a query logging and replay framework. And I think that's a great idea. We should talk more about and see if anyone's interested in working on that. That would be very useful.
We have 3 minutes left. So any questions at this point you want to ask? Well, I'm going to just say, I'm glad everyone showed up. Like we're well over 40 participants there for a while. I think we bored some people and they failed. But this looks like it's been successful on our end. I hope it's been successful for everyone in the community. Assuming the recording system worked, we'll post this later today. We're going to have another meeting in 1 or 2 weeks, depending on what everyone wants. If you guys want to talk more sooner, then we'll definitely do it sooner. Just follow up on Slack or in the comments here if you want to meet earlier. Is there an easy, one last question. All right. Is there an easy way to convert Hive Spark queries to Presto to ease migration? There is not an easy way to do that I'm aware of.
No, and I believe there was, like in the last Presto Summit, there was some discussion around that. Maybe something that either LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn or Netflix did around that area using a calcite, if I remember correctly. So like that's if someone wants to explore, LinkedIn, someone commented, yeah. So like that would be a great topic to explore more. We had something at Facebook that we did for the last couple of years. It was very specific to Facebook's version of Hive and the specific semantics and syntax. So, and it was tied to internal infrastructure. So,
where can we get the awesome T-shirts? We need to print some shirts. I totally agree.
Summit in Europe. Like if someone wants to help organize something like that, we've been talking to some people that were suggesting doing a summit in Israel in like around April. So we might just do that. But like if people want to host meetups or summits, I should feel free to do that. We'll make sure to support that.
Yes, absolutely. All right, looks like we're out of time. Thank you everyone for showing up. Thanks for the great questions. Let us know how this worked. If you have any suggestions to make it better, our plan is just keep repeating this. So thank you.